Updated news about what's going on in Guantanamo Bay as an FBI agent out of New York City, Frank Pellegrino, testifies in regards to the Guantanamo Five, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Amr al-Baluchi, Ramzi bin al-Shib, Mustafa al-Hassawi, and Tawfiq bin Atash, also known as Khalid, who are charged for facilitating, aiding, and financially supporting the planes operation, also known as the 9/11 attacks. Frank Pellegrino, a counterterrorism agent out of New York City, basically gave testimony about how the CIA torture program was a quote unquote flaming bag of crap, as we'll read regarding the testimony. And this is from the Messenger News. At Guantanamo 9/11 hearing, ex-FBI agent called CIA interrogation program flaming bag of crap. The former FBI agent who tracked alleged 9/11 mastermind, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, for years, actually, he was the only one who traced Khalid Sheikh Mohammed to the 93 bombing, because Khalid Sheikh Mohammed actually gave, I think it was $2,500, a Western Union wire transfer payment to Mohammed Salama. Salama was part of the bombing operation of the North Tower in 1993, and it was Frank Pellegrino who made that connection while nobody else knew who Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was, and they even told Pellegrino for years, "You're chasing a ghost. This guy ain't nothing." Pellegrino knew back in 93 this guy was something else. Even chased him all the way to Qatar, to the Philippines. Basically just disappeared, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. And it's alleged right around after that time that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed traveled all throughout Southeast Asia and even to Israel. That was from a New York Times article. So, a former FBI agent who tracked 9/11 mastermind Khalid Sheikh Mohammed for years is now a key witness in the case against him and other alleged plotters of the terrorist attacks. Bluntly told the Military Commissions Court on Wednesday about his frustration with the CIA's torture of 9/11 suspects and how it has tainted the investigation. I think the whole thing from the beginning was a flaming bag of crap that we got stuck with, retired Special Agent Frank Pellegrino said on cross-examination, referring to the CIA black site interrogation program and the so-called enhanced interrogation techniques it employed. Pellegrino was testifying as part of a long-delayed pretrial hearings in the case of Mohammed and three other men accused of playing a role in the organizing of the attacks. The hybrid military-civilian hearings are being held in a specially designed courtroom in Guantanamo Bay, where the four defendants have been detained since 2006. Pellegrino testified via video from a remote hearing room in Virginia. Pellegrino had investigated Mohammed since 93, when the Kuwaiti-born Pakistani militant was suspected of playing a role in the first bombing of the World Trade Center. In 2007, Pellegrino was part of the so-called clean team of investigators sent to Guantanamo to collect statements from suspected terrorists that could be used in court, unlike earlier statements that have been made at black sites. And what happened was, when Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Ramzi bin al-Shib, and Ali Abu Zubaydah and other al-Qaeda members were captured, the CIA took over these interrogation programs and started torturing these people. In essence, they gave testimony, true and false, about what they've done, but we can't use any of it because in a military commission, anything that's coerced by force or by torture cannot be used against that person because those charges and those statements were made under duress. So this is the reason why the clean teams came in. Now, to prosecute the defendants, lawyers are saying, well, they can't use that either. And they'll show you why in the article. Pellegrino said he was told prior to the 2000 interview that Mohammed had been subjected to a number of enhanced interrogation techniques, including open hand slapping, slamming against the wall, and sleep deprivation. Former agent said he didn't learn until years later when it was publicly reported that Mohammed had been subjected to far harsher techniques, including being waterboarded 183 times. Waterboarded 183 times in a single month. Rectal dehydration, forced, and being told by interrogators that his children would be killed if he didn't provide answers. We were not told what was happening in the black sites, Pellegrino said on Wednesday. He added that it was not something the FBI would do and that we disagreed with it. Pellegrino testified on Tuesday that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed had described himself as a slave, referring to the conditions of his own incarceration, and that he didn't like answering the questions Pellegrino was asking because it brought back bad memories. Pellegrino nonetheless maintained that he believes the statements were giving in his own interviews with Mohammed, which involved his role in planning the 9/11 attacks, and that they were freely given, and that Mohammed was able to stop the interviews anytime he wanted. My goal was to find out whether Mr. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed would speak to us voluntarily, Pellegrino said. The defense argues that these statements are still tainted by the prior torture and should not be admissible at trial. They note that one of the stated goals of the designers of the enhanced interrogation program was to break down detainees psychologically to the point where they would answer questions compliantly, as if in a natural conversation, without the use of torture. So, in other words, not only was this physical torture, but this was psychological torture. Pavlov's design, in other words, to have a repetitious behavior program implied in the subjects of the Guantanamo 4 here, or Ramzi Ben Al-Shib, who cannot stand trial because he's not mentally competent. You think these people are? So that even in a natural conversation, as the article implies, that the answers are going to come out repetitiously, like a Pavlovian response. So, because their fear is that I'm going to get waterboarded or worse, walled, hung up in the air naked for days on wires throughout my wrists. That's why you can't trust anything that they say, even though these are terrorists. I mean, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, before the 9/11 attacks, was a freelance terrorist. You got the Pachinko plot, you got the 93 bombing. I mean, it's not like he was a clean guy here, but you didn't have to torture him. Because with torture now, we don't know whether he's telling the truth or not, even if he is telling the truth. Maybe that's the reason why the CIA did this anyway, so the public will never know. They can always believe, right? Like I've always said in previous videos. That's exactly the case here. In another key point, Wednesday's cross-examination, Pellegrino testified that both he and Mohammed believed that the defendant had been transferred from CIA to military custody and that he was no longer with the people he was with before. In fact, the Senate Intelligence Committee report on torture released in 2014 revealed that the 14 detainees transferred from CIA black sites to Guantanamo were still under the operational control of the CIA, because the CIA is the one running these camps, these black sites, with the so-and-so authority of the State Department, even though the State Department doesn't want to know too much. And yet the Pentagon, under Donald Rumsfeld, who authorized the CIA to hire seer psychologists like James Mitchell and Bruce Jessens to come up with a program that would have a lesser means of torture called enhanced interrogation techniques. And what they did was implement a SEER program. I think it's like survival, evasive, and I forgot the other two, but something to where, detainees under the Soviets in the Cold War or under the Vietnam War, you had American soldiers that were captured and tortured, that would give up information freely. Well, how can we have people from Russia or Vietnam, when we capture their soldiers, how can we elicit admissions of statements or pertinent information from them? Well, back then they would have unusual, brutal methods, but they weren't working because they would elicit false confessions. Well, couldn't they put two and two together and find out that torture doesn't work even in this situation? No matter how much you dress it up, enhanced interrogation techniques is torture. End of story. Read Mark Fallon's book, Unjustifiable Means, about the history of the SEER program. I interviewed him for my program, The Dark and Hour. One of the most illuminating conversations I had with anybody was with Mark Fallon, because reading that book and talking with him, you get the whole picture of how this program started in Guantanamo and at these black sites. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that episode of the program with Mark Fallon in the description. I think it's that important to this article. At one point Wednesday, when Mohammed's lawyer Gary Silwaj asked Pellegrino about the CIA's operational control, the audio feed from the courtroom to the viewing gallery was cut, and the proceedings paused for 2 hours. His attorneys worked out how to discuss the matter without revealing classified information. We shouldn't be having classified information 22 years from now regarding this trial, which is not even a trial because it didn't even start. These are the pretrial hearings. What are we holding back here? Everything should be on the fucking table here. And it shouldn't even be in Guantanamo. It should be at the Southern District of New York. But Obama, the CIA said no. At least I recall you, the Attorney General for Obama wanted it here. One of the few things good about him. And the Department of Defense, CIA said no. Jeffrey Goldherring, one of the prosecutors in the September 11 case, has called the statements that defendants made to the clean teams in Guantanamo the most critical evidence in the case, because even the prosecution knows that the torture confessions can't be used. But is that all the evidence? As this article will state, because I did a podcast about this too, and I did it with Nick Fielding, co-author of the book Masterminds of Terror, because Khalid Sheikh Mohammed admitted to Yosri Fuda, an Al Jazeera reporter, about being behind the 9/11 attacks. And that's before he was captured. Look at what it says here. They are not the only evidence. In Mohammed's case, he also gave an interview to Al Jazeera journalists in 2002 discussing his roles in the attacks. And in an earlier military commission trial in 2009, Mohammed issues a statement boasting about the blessed September 11th operation. But the Yosri, now when I interviewed Nick Fielding, it's alleged that Yosri Fuda videotaped this meeting, and the CIA has it. Now, this is the reason why I'm fearing a plea deal, because if there's a plea deal and the lawyers say yes, and the defendants say yes, that means whatever the prosecution has, and I said this before, we'll never know because it's classified, including that videotape. You won't know until 30, 40 years from now. In the case of the other three defendants in the case who have a less public profile, suppressing the Guantanamo statements could be a bigger blow to the prosecution. They're very, very important to the government's case. But whether they're the whole of the government's case or only a major part of the government's case depends on the individual. James Connell, attorney for Amr al-Baluchi, one of the other defendants, told reporters in Guantanamo this week. Amr al-Baluchi is also known as Abdul Aziz al-Aziz and is the nephew of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. And this key evidence is lost to the prosecution. It could increase the likelihood of a plea deal before trial. This is what I'm afraid of. This happens. This fucks us. The researchers, investigators, reporters. You know why? Because we'll never know what the government didn't have, and we won't know what the government had until 30, 40 years from now. And for you youngsters out there, you're gonna be the ones who are filing the FOIA request regarding the declassification of this evidence, which will go through a declassification review. Pretrial hearings in the case, which were delayed by a number of factors, including the COVID-19 pandemic, are likely to continue for some time. Connell said that on the issue of the admissibility of these statements alone, there could be between 10 and 110 remaining witnesses, depending on strategies calls by the defense. He predicted it could be years and years before the case reaches trials, if it ever does. This is the reason why the trial hasn't started, because the prosecution, the CIA, the Department of Defense very well know, and the NSA, let's not forget them, they all know that the admissions of at least Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, but the others, like Amr al-Baluchi, Mustafa al-Hassawi, the ones who didn't give statements to Yossi Fuda, unlike Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and Ramzi bin al-Shib did. But bin al-Shib is out because he's declared mentally unfit. You have to wonder if these guys are going to be declared mentally unfit too. And imagine these guys walk. Well, anyway, these guys could basically walk if they can't use the testimonies made under duress. Because the government, unless they have, the phone calls made by these people in the Yemen hub or through Bin Laden satellite phones, unless they were talking about it on these phones, they have no case. Now, I'm starting to wonder whether they were talking about it on these phones. Now, I have to say that they had to. At least through the Yemen hub. But that means declassifying that information by the NSA. And they hoarded this information. Even the CIA doesn't have this. The Department of Defense doesn't have this. The Office of National Intelligence doesn't have this. Only the NSA has this. So Michael Hayden, who was the director then, I wonder if I'm the only person to ever, I'm sure James Bamford did, thought of this idea. And I'm going to assume Paul Thompson maybe, or Kevin Fenton. But I think I'm the only active person to ever imply that there should be someone who will follow a FOIA request. I don't know how to file one. I think I might talk to somebody who knows. And I know it's a pipe dream because it's classified information. It's going to be rejected because the government may have this on their case. And I can't see it. I'm a citizen. So I'm going to assume this is classified. But man, would I like to see those transcripts. Because if the prosecution, their whole case rests on these statements made under torture, boy, does this open up a can of worms. And also, imagine these guys walking. Yeah, that means nobody's held accountable for 9/11. The pipe dream is this. I think what we need to do is basically do what the Florida Bulldog states and Dan Christensen insinuates, Anthony Summers and Robin Swan. We have enough new information to hold a new investigation. With this new investigation, hopefully we can get more declassification reviews about information from the NSA, CIA, and also from the Israelis and Saudis. My God, what information do they have, or did they have? Maybe they did. Regarding the hijackers and their plans inside the United States. I mean, it would be a big waste of time for the Israelis and Saudis to basically follow these guys and nothing's happening. They follow these guys right up until the day which leads me to conveniently and confidently state, with conviction, I might add, that the Israelis and Saudis may very well be the agencies, as well as the NSA, I think, that have the specifics: time, date, who, what, where, and why. Or a combination of some of those things. Because that's the only thing missing here. I think they do. And if we can get the Shea memorandum, we can get Operation Encore, if we can get more declassification reviews, we can open a new investigation, and a bigger one than the 9/11 Commission, a bigger one than the Joint Inquiry. Even bigger investigations from the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence or the Senate Select Hearing on Able Danger. We have more information now than they did then. So what's stopping us? Well, we don't have much of the way of influence because this ain't 2003 or 2002. The attacks are still fresh. It's 2023, and a lot has passed us by. We need a bigger audience, a responsible audience that will pressure for a new investigation. Now, I know there's some old media, Jimmy Dore, Robert Kennedy Jr., Vivek Ramaswamy, right? So we have some attention from some people, memorable people with big followings. We need more. It's going to come from you, the average person, like me, the average person. And we need a lot more voices. And I hope to hear from you soon. All right, guys. As usual, any updates on the case in Guantanamo and 9/11, you'll hear from me without bias and without prejudice. Have a good night, everybody.